This is not my first piece of public speaking this year. It was just a few months ago I was approached by a university in London to give a presentation for which, and it has to be said, I was offered a very modest, a very small fee indeed. And I said to the principal of the college, just before I gave my talk, what would happen if I waived my fee? Mr. Brown, he said, that's very generous of you. We put the money into a high interest account, other donations would come along, and we'd just wait till the whole account accrued to a really substantial amount. I said, well, that's fine. What would happen after that? Oh, he replied, we'd take all the money out in one large sum, and with it, we'd pay for a really good speaker to come along. Stalking. It's all about the celebrities, isn't it? Look at the news, newspapers. If there's a stalking case, it's all about celebrities. And that's right. The development of the media, more access to information, it's a very dangerous basis on which stalkers can survive. And people who are celebrities often subject to stalking, sometimes with terrible results. But you know, the stalking of celebrities, although very serious, is actually the tip of the iceberg. Because the overwhelming people who are stalked are the ordinary people in the street. They don't have security and agents and people like that to look after them. They have to fend for themselves. And what I'm going to talk about today is really stalking and the ordinary person in the street, the people the police and others are more likely to deal with. What I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about stalking generally, dealing with the victims, the psychological effect it can have. What is stalking? What's it all about? What can amount to stalking? And then with that, I shall come down and actually talk about a few examples of cyber stalking. What we're here to talk about, the digital safety of it. But really, I can't talk about that until I go through a few issues of stalking so you understand what the problem is. And it's just for you to take out of this which fits in with your life, your professional life, your private life, advice you give staff possibly, advice you give other people, or maybe issues which unfortunately have happened to you. So something on stalking, and then I'll come on to the digital side of it. So why me? I was a detective inspector at Scotland Yard on the Specialist Crime Directorate, and I had the happy trio of rape, murder and contract killing. So why should I be remotely interested in people receiving bunches of flowers or being followed incessantly up and down the street? Well, what I want to do is turn the clock back a few years, before we had stalking legislation, and talk about a case I walked into, investigated, and the reason for this is to go over the psychological damage stalking can have. I went to a police station in southwest London. An ongoing stalking case was under investigation. Been running for a few months and involved a young lady called Karen. She was 17, going on 18. She lived with her mum and dad, slightly older sister, worked part-time at the local McDonald's just for some money, help her buy, and attended a business college, do her studies. She didn't have a care in the world, lots of friends, that sort of thing. But a few months before I arrived at this police station, her life changed because she was the subject of what was later called in court of a campaign of terror of what was to be 64 anonymous letters left on her car or sent through the post. And I took one look at this as the detective inspector and I thought it was so serious I'd take the case on myself. The first of the letters, which were on Karen's car. In fact, the majority were to be sent to her home address. And the first letter said, somebody very close to you needs your help. Failure to do anything may result in your death. My spirit for revenge will be hard to extinguish. You cannot escape me. My hate growing free every day. This is no joke. Well, indeed, Karen thought it was a joke. A misplaced joke, not very funny, but a joke all the same. Well, the next day, a letter at home arrived. As much as I love you, time is running out. And I'm starting to lose patience with you. To treat me like shit won't do. I'll give you one last chance. Above anything, treat me with more respect. There's someone out there that badly wants you, and if I don't see any changes, the consequences could be very dangerous for you, Karen. There's one letter which arrived which we thought was a big clue. In fact, it was a red herring. You cannot escape me. I'm with you in class every day, watching you. My hate's growing for you every day. Stalker wanted a little game with the police. I was waiting outside your house today, 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. You got home 5:40 to 5:50 p.m. You might have seen me. I was on my bicycle wearing a baseball cap. More for the police to go on. And one which particularly terrified me. Time is running out for both of us. Neither you or I will be alive when this year is out. Our sacrifice will be a symbol to the world. You will become the most famous victim, and I will become the most famous stalker in the world. Needless to say that Karen was absolutely terrified. She was low, under a doctor, on antidepressants, in a terrible state. No idea who is sending these letters or leaving them on her car. But what must be remembered, and I speak to diverse groups, including a section I have an awful lot of time for, and that's victim support. What I tell people is, there's more than one victim here. How about the family who had to go through this torment with Karen? And not put a too fine a point on it, when she left the house, did Mum and Dad know whether she was coming back? Who was out there? So come the date of trial, we took a statement from Karen's mum, Linda, just to say how family life had deteriorated over that 6 months. What an awful time they had of it. And the thing that really got to the family was the letterbox going. Was it the gas bill, the freebie newspaper, junk mail, or was it a letter from the stalker? So that input from the family was very, very important. We put a surveillance team on Karen. It's unusual to put a surveillance team on a victim. You normally do it on a suspect, but we didn't have a suspect. We didn't know who we were looking for. And we got Karen to drive down certain roads, go around roundabouts twice, that sort of thing. Always difficult surveillance, because we hadn't the faintest idea who we were looking at, but just someone who's paying some sort of attention to her. And actually, it paid off. The car hadn't been targeted for some time. We told Karen when she went to college, park in a certain part, and we'll take up the surveillance from there. That's what she did. We said, run on your own. Static observation on the car. We saw someone walk through the car park. Nothing wrong in that. Back an hour later, he was looking about him. We were unhappy with him. And we put the surveillance team on this man. And he was in and out of the college. We couldn't think what he was doing. We had the right man, all right. 21 years old, no previous convictions. Wasn't at that college at all. He was at university somewhere. But had previously worked at McDonald's with Karen. Infatuated with her. They never had a relationship. It never would have happened anyway. And when he left, he was just taking it out on Karen for this relationship never happening. And that letter earlier, the red herring, I'm with you in class every day. Of course, he wasn't there. We couldn't understand why he was walking in and out the college and round the classroom blocks. And what he was doing was he was lining up 2 classroom blocks so he could look down a series of windows into Karen's class. And if she dropped a pen or knocked over a coffee cup, he used to write that in the letter, giving the impression he was with her all the time. Eventually, we stayed on him. He left a note on the car. Letter 64. He numbered all the letters in the top right-hand corner. Looks like I'm losing my scary appeal. You seem to be immune to my letters. I might have to give up this way of stalking and think of another idea. I've got a target of sending 70 letters by the end of March and over 90 by mid-May, so you'll be hearing a lot from me in the future. After chase, he was arrested. But what offence had he committed? A minor offence of threatening behaviour and a £100 fine. I didn't really think that that covered the mental torture Karen and her family had experienced. And I brought one of the first charges of its type in this country. I charged grievous bodily harm. You'll know that's a very serious assault, like someone being stabbed or glassed. But I charged grievous bodily harm to the mind, a psychological assault. And like any other assault, I had Karen examined. But this time it's through a psychiatrist. He went on to say she had all the hallmarks of post-traumatic stress syndrome, with intense feelings, anxiety, mood swings, irritability, hypervigilance, and intrusive thoughts as well as flashbacks and nightmares. And he went on, the consequences of these symptoms on the individual's life are every bit as significant as that of considerable physical injuries, such as broken limbs or disfigurement. It's my opinion the injuries sustained by Karen are the equivalent of physical injuries which would be considered serious enough to warrant a charge of grievous bodily harm. The defendant didn't get that £100 fine. He got 4.5 years for his troubles. Just the first few lines of that report, the psychiatrist's report. All the hallmarks of post-traumatic stress syndrome, with intense feelings, anxiety, mood swings, irritability, hypervigilance, and intrusive thoughts as well as flashbacks and nightmares. And that's what stalking's about, that mental torture. And it particularly applies to crimes like domestic violence, when sometimes there's no physical injury, but it's the terror that's imposed. Well, who stalks? Why do they do it? In the majority of instances, the people who stalk are men stalking women. And domestic violence is often associated, but doesn't have to be, of course. It can be same-sex stalking, men on men, women on women. Not always connected with a relationship, but sometimes can be. Not always celebrities, of course, I've already said that, and it must be taken seriously. On the point of women on women stalking, I actually appear in this month's Cosmopolitan. It's the July edition, but it's out now. And they're running something on women stalking. So if you do buy a copy, you'll see in heavy print at the front cover, just under Cosmopolitan, in heavy print it says great sex. Now, I just want to say, so there's no confusion, that's not me. I'm on the other side of the page, in smaller print I might add, the new female stalkers. So £2 and on sale at all good bookshops. There's law to deal with this. It's called the Protection from Harassment Act. What this law talks about, I'm not going to keep on saying Protection from Harassment Act, I'm going to talk about the law to deal with stalkers. And what this law deals with is a higher and lower offence. And it says, look, you could have 2 acts, and I'm going to go over the higher and lower offences just to give some ideas, some examples of what stalking's about. And the lower offence talks about harassment, but no definition. It includes alarm or distress, so harassment, alarm or distress. And I suppose the most important thing I've got to say today to understand stalking is that the acts in isolation may well not be criminal offences, but put it all together, that's when it digs in. The person being followed, hanging around outside someone's house, that sort of thing, the persistent unwanted attention, it is not welcome and can amount to stalking. That's what it's about. It's an uncertainty to intimidate, frighten, terrify. A lady comes out of the house one day, looks down the garden path. The manhole cover's been pushed to one side, which means every time she goes down the garden path, she's got to go down with a torch when it's night time. Or, in fact, what happened was she had to leave by her sideway door. Living lovers, obviously got a key. He's left the house, but he's come back when she's not there and rearranged the furniture slightly. The woman living on her own comes back to find the toilet seat's been left up. The chess pieces are now facing the other way. It's 10 o'clock at night, knock on the door. Here's your cab for the airport. I didn't order a cab. 10 o'clock the next night, here are the pizzas you ordered. I don't like pizzas, leave me alone. It's that sort of thing. Acts in isolation, not criminal offences, but totality really getting to someone. Situation of a lady who's a habit of writing post-it notes herself, just to remind us to do things. The live-in lover, again, has left, they're split up, and she writes on a post-it note, buy some bread, she puts it on the kitchen table, goes down the road for a few hours, see her girlfriend for a coffee. When she comes back, there on the kitchen table is a loaf of bread, just playing with the mind. There's a lower offence, it carries up to 6 months imprisonment, and that's the one which is most commonly used. The higher offence, fear of violence, not a threat, but a fear, up to 5 years imprisonment. Send the undertakers round with a coffin to go and pick someone up. Brochures of gravestones being delivered. Someone comes back from shopping to find a wreath on their front door. All these sort of things. That's what it's all about. Acts in isolation, not crimes. Put it all together, that's where it digs in. So let's look at the digital side. Cyber stalking, say the Crown Prosecution Service, generally takes the form of threatening behaviour or unwanted advances at another using the internet or other forms of online communication. Well, there are different methods for this. Threatening abusive emails, of course. Spamming, live chat harassment, unsolicited mail sent, sending electronic viruses. What about, and it's normally a lady who's stalked, what about the lady who gets 30 text messages a day just saying hello, how are you? So every time it bleeps, there's a sort of jump. Is it from the stalker or is it a friend? A case recently I was asked to advise on where a lady who's estranged from her husband, she's walking down the road with her young son, 5-year-old son called John, holding his hand, and she gets a text message. Now clearly she's been watched by the estranged husband. The text message goes off, she looks at it, and it just says, John's shoelace is undone. John's shoelace was undone. It's not a crime to send that message, but my goodness, what an effect it had on her. A few years ago, I advised of a case in Blackpool, and it involved two men who fell out over a business deal, so not a relationship as such. And one man sent the other, using a bomber, over 14,000 messages in a short space of time. It nearly drove him mad. His little shop opened up into an alleyway, and he sort of conjured up in his mind that if he came out, the man would be waiting at the end. All the offences were in Blackpool. Both men were from Blackpool. It entirely surrounded Blackpool. The case was dealt with, however, at Preston Magistrates Court, because both men were magistrates at Blackpool Magistrates Court, of which only one is now. Something that made the press last year. Web boss waged email war on rival who lured away clients. Lady worked with a man, she moved away, and he alleged took her clients. And he's going to get back at her. So he went under a false name, a lady's name. Made her life difficult, emailing her, calling her a destructive liar who could be easily got rid of. She took got rid of as something quite serious. She took it as a direct threat. Another email, this creature has no conscience. She has invested in a seedy company run by a former drug addict. The courts feel that was far too over the top and convicted him of stalking. One particular aspect of stalking harassment is that the stalkers think they can get round the law by doing this indirectly. Not actually stalking the person, but creating an atmosphere which is very difficult for the victim. This indirect stalking. But the law can cater for this. And I suppose when we think about stalking, to think outside the box, think laterally, what's it all about? And I suppose this is one of the worst cases I've come across where the person is devious, really dodgy about it. There's a man called David. David ran a football team in South London. He's a nice chap, really. And he was assisted by a lady called Chloe. Chloe worked in a health club not far from here. It was a highly reputable health club where image is